I hope everyone's week is off to a good start. I did put a wee post up over the weekend as a reminder to myself to make some time and space to share some insights and reflections about having a movement practice or engaging with dance specifically, and how that complements and supports voice work. And there are several strands to this, and I want to be able to weave them together in a way that is also inclusive or touches on conversations that I've been having in particular over the last month, I would say, because my own movement practice over this last period and over this month in particular has been more active, and therefore when you are more engaged and doing and practicing and being with something, you're kind of you're immersed in that energy and you are speaking to it as well as moving through it. And as a result, the quality of conversations that I've had about movement practice have all been really stimulating, and it's nice, and it's also affirming to be able to talk to, well, other creative practitioners for one, but also people that identify or associate with movement as part of their primary practice, or that actually might even be something that they do professionally. So yes, having opportunities to share interactions and movement space, and just musing on movement with other minds and bodies, I think is the important thing there. Is really nice to have that. And the thread of exploration that I've been in personally is actually about a reconnection with, or permission for, more immersion in movement practice. And to give context, movement has always been something that I have explored, or physicality and exploration through body is always something that I have been really engaged with, not just within the kind of context of dance. I did do a little bit of ballet training when I was quite young, and I actually pressed pause on that because the format and the structure of that was very much leaning then towards like a kind of formalized process, exams and that kind of sequence. And I remember very strongly at the time feeling suddenly quite resistant to that particular form of expression, of feeling like, oh, this is really girly. Whatever stage of development I was at where that kind of self-consciousness was starting to creep in, that was definitely something that informed my request to shift directions. It also happened to coincide with the growing interest and development in the musical side of things, and a request made by letter actually to a visiting music teacher to the primary school that I was at, who led the kind of choral sessions and was mostly focused on getting folk together and yeah, teaching us repertoire. And but she was a very skilled pianist, and yeah, that obviously sparked a kind of conversation that led to a request for, oh, would you consider giving lessons? And dates I'm not clear on, but this all would have coincided with yeah, beginning to work with strings as well, and yeah, having keyboard skills to kind of feed into that was part of that classical training model template. So yeah, that kind of set me on the musical pathway through the kind of formal education route. I've missed out the prehistoric stuff about the way that I would explore voice in a kind of intuitive, natural way, which actually I would say I've come back full circle to that quality of play. Because yeah, I want to focus on the movement piece, but in a way it is difficult because I'm trying to express that it is actually so connected to voice. It is, if you like, an extension of the voice, an extension of the capacity and possibility for the voice to be creatively articulated through a different medium. One conversation I had the other week with another movement person was actually, we were talking about improvisation, and it was a really interesting discussion because I think I'd commented on, oh, I loved it when you did this move, or like, you know, that was amazing, where did that come from, kind of thing. And then they described the image in their mind that helped them to create that shape or that phrasing with the body. And then I started reflecting on some movement stuff that I had done, which they had also witnessed, and talking about the space that was available and the ideas about boundary and stage and where things kind of began and ended in what effectively was a performance space. And I was speaking to this thing of needing to come completely into the body and detach from the awareness that there is an observer or audience there, in order to not get actually pulled into that focus, which would in fact change an expression that would be a response, an intuitive, an improvisatory response to the music and the moment and the available energy within yourself to give further voice or elaborate through movement what you are interpreting energetically and viscerally, to integrate the awareness of the watcher, then shifts something into a kind of performative narrative, which then feels like it is working in what one feels like one should be doing, demonstrating, or performing for the gaze of others, maybe for the approval. So there's interesting dynamics at play there. And I think that can be true of any improvisation expression, whatever the modality. It could be musical, instrumental, vocal. Dance is one of those spaces that feels particularly poignant, and especially if you look at then spaces that people go to dance where that is the objective, or there is a kind of shared intention or purpose that is facilitated by how a space is set up, and amplified music and a gathering, and then room to explore and play. The discussion about dance floor dynamics is a much bigger conversation, and to do that justice, I would really need to expand on a timeline with that, and I can speak to that on lots of different levels, particularly from the point of view of unmasking, de-armoring, holding space, trying to maintain personal boundary and safety as a woman on your own in a shared space. But yeah, it's a much bigger, sprawling conversation to focus on that aspect of it. But just to mention it in passing, that is all. The reference point of that kind of canvas, the dance floor as a canvas and the body as your tool, your paintbrush, to actually shape sound, to shape a lyrical imagery, like lyrical, drawing on the lyrical reference point of a song and translating that into a movement quality, is something I really like to do. And in this same discussion with this person, I think I then was speaking to yes, the containment of the performance space and needing to create a limitation with that in order to be able to move safely and navigate with kind of closed eyes, or eyes that were not focused on the observation piece. And then there was the insight about the particular song or piece of music that was available for me to experiment with, and that in fact when I am moving, I am vocally rehearsing, I am interoceptively tracking what I would be doing if I were to be vocalizing that piece. And the response to that is essentially the impetus that informs the movement. So the breath points, the inflections, the shift and change in dynamic and pace. I'm drawing on my musicality, and I'm drawing on that training, as well as what is inherently available instinctively to pull on as well. But that's such an interesting way to be able to think about movement as an expression or extension of voice, because this idea of letting the body sing, or letting the body be a mirror for the actual sensation of the music and the vibration flowing through you, is something that I suppose there is a kind of a striving quality there in how I would approach movement practice, because I know that if I continue to shed layers of unhelpful tension, which is also what I would be striving to achieve in a voice work practice, knowing that that would be part of the process to supporting me to be able to be more in touch with my natural sound, with a more uninhibited and unimpeded flow of energy, better access to breath, better sensitivity and connection to visceral response, and that sense of the moments of expansion and contraction, and the continual experience of movement that is an inherent part of vocalizing and singing. To think about it specifically through the dance and movement lens, and to use the voice then as a kind of metaphor or way of describing, the idea that the body is an instrument. I know that the more freed up I am, the more dexterity I have to be able to speak to all of the different inflections and dynamics and textures within the music, and that is being kind of pulled from that instrumental perspective as a player, and that technical movement that is accompanied by that, but then also the production values of music that speaks to another part of the kind of the oral training, which is very stimulating for me, and I'm really interested in the production side of things, and that is also part of my creative practice as an artist, the recording but also the post-production. So to be able to shape spatiality with the body that speaks to different qualities of production is like, I find it really exciting, really stimulating, and challenging also, because it is being asked, or I am asking of myself, if that sound is moving through me or moving me into a response, and I'm allowing myself to be shaped by that sound wave, to what extent am I actually allowing that that blueprint or that template, that energy template to offer me a tapestry that I can actually explore, or if I am receiving sonically that information and I am allowing my physical channels to be as open and receptive as they possibly can be, then the body becomes the musical, the stave. It becomes, and the notes become the subtle shifts and micro movements of the body. So it does feel inherently like movement and voice for me are interwoven, and that although time and space is given to explore and immerse in each as separate practices, which each have lots of different strands and facets in their own right, that the marriage is so natural because they speak to each other, and there is a language of coherence that allows there to be that really harmonious relationship. And the extension of movement that wants to come through when there is more activation being used with voice, even to speak with the hands, and to conduct and to shape sound, and to be sculpting sound, especially in improvisatory practice, I think, because there is so much of that is rooted in a kind of call and response quality. And that call and response is the movement and the sound working together. And also just even in visual models for how I map out voice and think about voice and speak about it, I find visual representations of qualities of movement that actually reveal and help you to track patterns are so helpful, and to use movement as the analogy to maybe describe things that are they're kind of tricky to speak to in solely intellectual ways, because that then cauterizes the body from the head, and we kind of lose that coherence. So visualizations relating to expansion and contraction I often use, and I think about that now more closely in relation to like autonomic hierarchy and the autonomic ladder, and the polyvagal perspective as a way of helping me describe layers and dimensions of experience in relation to safety and connection. And I feel like that is really helpful to have the visual guide with the quality of movement, which then allows the body to comprehend the concepts, but then also the fact that there is a language to name those different stages and spaces and places within the self is really helpful, because then it allows you to have a kind of fully integrated way of being able to articulate something, and that maybe the vocabulary or the terminology will vary slightly person to person depending on what their reference point is, but because it is also attached to a visual prompt, and it's also attached to a quality of movement, it means that there are actually other layers of communication that can be comprehended. So there is less opportunity for someone's expression to be like lost in translation. And so the in and out, expansion, contraction, the quality of spiraling movement also, yes, coming in, moving inwardly, and using that as part of a process for visualizations, for check-ins, but that it is directed by an intention that is movement centered, and also the idea of whether that spiral is moving inward or outward, that there is also a micro movement happening as well within that. Like there's maybe a bigger arc or journey that is happening where there is an exploration outward, looking to external spaces, and then there is a returning, coming back inside to check in, to integrate, to realign with the original question or intention. But whatever direction of travel that is going in, there's also this miniature journey happening, that is a kind of a continual spiraling process. So actually drawing these things, mapping them out, describing them with words, and trying to find the kind of terminology to articulate that, but in a way that is accessible. So making reference to body and movement and physical sensation, because that is the kind of barometer that we can then share with each other an experience of how is it going, because we're able to then say, well, this is what is presenting, this is what my body is sensing and feeling, and that's really powerful to utilize skill, knowledge, information, technique from movement practice to then support the expression of voice work practice that can actually sometimes feel like it's intangible and really difficult to actually describe, because what we hear and what we sound is only a small part of what is actually going on in the body, emotionally, socially, in the mind. So yeah, the two worlds come together, if you like, and allow there to be a bridge in communication. And also, interestingly, what cannot be vocalized, or what feels difficult to be vocalized, can often, in my own case, be expressed through a quality of movement. That might be a precursor to actually freeing up some energy to feel like that vocal channel is more accessible, to give permission for there to be sound to actually come through. And also sometimes to create and to sound without the anchor point or attachment to language can feel more exposing, like to be working with only open vowel sounds can feel more exposing than the architecture of consonants or kind of sounds that create structure and shape, or words that create pictures and concepts in your mind. So sometimes having movement as the first play space can offer a way of being able to express something that maybe cannot be articulated through language and is maybe not ready to be explored through sound. And that comes back to then the preparation work that I do, and I still call this voice work. A lot of what I call voice work is still silent work, because looking at body as instrument, thinking about using voice and working towards moving from unvoiced to voiced, from not sounding to sounding, and to sounding at a level that is at the top of range or capacity for that day, maybe even into the territory of full voiced, performative, dynamic, energetic singing. There's a journey to get there, and much of that work is the foundational exercise, physical exercise of softening, lengthening, opening, stretching, unwinding, releasing, and also breath, and all of these other things that are foundational, but they are also keys to unlock doors to support you to get to that ultimate destination that you feel you might want to travel to, and that you want to be able to access in a way that feels as uninhibited as possible. And I'm speaking to this primarily from the point of view of a practitioner rooted in my practice, and it's difficult to separate that entirely from the role of facilitation work, because that is part of my overall ecosystem, with research being the other part of that as well. But what my process is different to the one-on-one with somebody that comes into the studio on that day that has a particular goal or a particular challenge. There is a journey to get there, and there is a toolbox available, and those tools have been played with, practiced with, refined, adapted, so that there is a comprehension there about how they can be offered to an individual, to support them to start playing and exploring and practicing and experimenting with them, to see if that sequence in that order in that moment is in fact the tool that supports them to work through the challenge that they may be encountering. And just because there is a step-by-step process and there is a sequence and there is a logic, it doesn't mean that that cannot be deviated from, and it does not mean that the individual that is coming into that space cannot bring their own pre-existing approaches and techniques and methodologies into a way of working. So what works for one person is not necessarily that exact template that is going to work for someone else. So I feel like that is important to acknowledge. But yeah, to close this off, I would not be as flexible and as playful and adventurous with what I feel safe and even confident to explore with my own voice had I not given myself permission to play adventurously in the realm of movement. And dance for me as a training ground to really push my own boundaries, to learn about my physical capacity, to understand my stamina, to feel into my boundaries of my own body, but of my own body in relation to other bodies in a space. My willingness to go into a space of exploration that is saturated inside of an experience and that is actually turning down the dials and removing distraction from the external space, and doing that by actually coming into the body and coming into center. Dance has given me tools, it has given me flexibility to be able to do that, which feeds directly into and nourishes the voice work practice. And this sense that we are always moving, we are alive, we are pulsing, we are vibrating, and stillness is something in the relationship I have to a spiritual practice that feels more conceptual rather than literal, because even in a quality of stillness, there is still the rise and fall of breath, there is still the the beating of heart, there is still the pumping of blood, but those spaces are equally important, and I have spoken to that in terms of like the space in between, or integration, catch up, periods between more intense activity, being actually often where the creative inspiration comes through strongly, because there has been sufficient room for the emotional aspect of the self to catch up to all that has been going on, especially if we've been engaging in a quite active pursuit of something, which of course is working with the physical, but it's also working with that mental energy as well, and transmuting that, interpreting and then transmuting into a quality of movement. And yes, the emotional self can feel neglected at points. So integration feels like a really helpful, yes, a helpful place of pause, that also gives everything a chance to find its natural rhythm again. We gather energy, we cultivate it, we set an intention with how we want to use it, and then we strike out on a path of exploration, and then we interface with all that comes our way until we are ready to withdraw again, or come back to center and come back to, okay, where have I been? What have I been doing? What have I learned? What insights and riches would I like to keep, to, put in the rucksack to take with me for the next part of the journey? And what am I maybe ready to let go of, and what feels like it's too heavy to carry, or is not something that I need to bring. So yeah, I hope this has been insightful on one level or another. And yeah, I feel like the more I'm giving myself space and time and permission to nourish the movement practice that I have, and being energized by that, and remembering how important it is, and how it allows me space to get to know my body in new ways. And yeah, there's some old ways too, some remembrance. I think this is all really useful and helpful information that can then support how we move into voice work practice, how we prepare and warm up the instrument, and also, yeah, the sense of how adventurously we can possibly step into territory unknown, and that because the body has maybe been there already, or we have invited that extension of reaching towards something, that can sometimes be the catalyst that gives permission for the voice to continue that expression and to follow suit, and actually, yeah, reach new new spaces outside of ourselves. So again, this idea of bringing the inside out, and being brave with that, and giving permission for that. So I will leave it there, and if any of this is resonating with you, if you have your own movement practice, whatever that looks like, I would love to hear about it. Always very, very keen and happy to speak to other creative practitioners and dancers and movers and obviously musicians and those that are specifically working with voice as well. There is so much that we can share with each other. There's so much crossover, there are so many parallels, and it can be really rewarding and supportive to have the soundboarding or the reflection by having those conversations with others. So please feel free to engage and participate and let me know which perspective you're coming from. And keep tuned to our channels for more bits and pieces that are voice focused. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.